Hi, it's Jonathan Cotton with the Good Feet Store, and I've shared before how I love an organization called TAPS, Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors. Recently, we invited some TAPS family members who had lost a military loved one to have dinner with us. As we listened to their stories, I was reminded again of how the loss of a military loved one is such a devastating experience. Not only is the loved one gone, but often they lose their military community, and sometimes an entire lifestyle. My heart was sad over their grief, yet my spirit was inspired by their courage. Then to top it off, I was amazed at their graciousness as they thanked us for just listening. At the Good Feet Store, we love helping you get out of pain and back into the life you love, and we love supporting the work of TAPS. Come in today for your free fitting and test walk and ask any of our team members why TAPS is an organization that every American can support. Visit goodfeet.com for the location nearest you.
Any moment that lets you just sit back, relax, and enjoy even 1 second of the day to yourself and taste like pumpkins, that's a moment to look forward to. The McCafe Pumpkin Spice Latte is back. Get a $2 small hot or iced for a limited time. Or try one of our other freshly brewed espresso drinks. From iced caramel macchiatos to caramel frappes to hot mochas to every sweet treat in between. Only at McDonald's. Price and participation may vary.
You're in the place where mysteries and the missing meet. Where conspiracies lurk around every corner. Welcome to the Deep, Dark Truth.
Welcome back to the Deep Dark Truth. I'm Mo.
I'm Chip.
And I'm Mikey.
And today we're going to be discussing The Men in Black, Part 2 in our 3-part West Virginia series. While we recommend listening to our last episode on Mothman, we are going to do a quick recap about how Mothman and The Men in Black are linked. In fact, Mothman, The Men in Black, and Injured Cold are so interlinked when it comes to researching this topic, it led to this 3-part series. A good amount of references will be made to works by Jim Keith, John Keel, Gray Barker, Albert K. Bender, and others. You can always find a
Will
list
Smith.
And of course, Will Smith. You can always find a list of our sources for this series by following our link in the show notes, where we have compiled a list of sources for the entire series into one post. But before we jump into it, let's take a minute to thank today's sponsor, HelloFresh.
Today's episode is brought to you by HelloFresh.
Do you feel like you are stuck in a dinner rut?
With HelloFresh, you can get fresh, pre-measured ingredients with mouth-watering seasonal recipes delivered right to your door.
Skip all those trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make your home cooking easy, fun, and affordable.
You can now enjoy cooking and get dinner on the table in 30 minutes or less.
With over 25 recipes to choose from each week, there's something for everyone to enjoy.
All recipes are designed and tested by professional chefs and nutritional experts to ensure deliciousness and simplicity.
My favorite meal from HelloFresh is the bruschetta chicken, but I'm sure I have many more to try in the future.
They also have vegetarian options.
Go to the link in our show notes to get $80 off, including free shipping on HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit.
Coming soon to a mailbox near you.
At the end of our last episode, we told you about John Keel's account of the Men in Black and how before he had encountered them, he had heard several testimonies from eyewitnesses while investigating, which eventually led to the publishing of the Mothman Prophecies, also known by the title Visitors from Space, The Astonishing True Story of the Mothman Prophecies. So, while interviewing these witnesses and researching his book, the witnesses Keel encountered described them as being in black clothing, driving brand new cars that seemed extremely out of place in the area, and having either tanned or darker skin. By the end of his time spent in Point Pleasant, Keel alleged to have been visited by them as well and described them as, quote, demonic supernaturals, unquote.
Huh. I just want to talk about the movie. I don't want to deal with racism. Justice for Will Smith.
Exotic facial feature thing I have questions about. And these, it's not just John Keel that describes them this way. They're described this way very frequently. And I'm not sure if using the word exotic because of the descriptions, it seems like what they meant was more like ethereal, but I feel like they couldn't find the word to describe that because they're also at times described as very tall, very slender, and just being otherworldly of sorts.
Are you sure it's not just a small town in the 60s in West Virginia that has a bunch of fucking racists who only know one word?
That is also fair. Also, just the idea that you live in a small rural town and you might not see very many people of color to begin with, and so they would feel extremely out of place.
I would feel like they're still familiar with it, like they're not completely oblivious to it. Using the word exotic.
Yeah, I feel like they would have been more direct, like even if they said African American or like something that they would have said at the time that would be very racistly slanted here. Like the N-word, but not that N-word, the other N-word. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do.
Man, this show.
Yeah.
I feel like they would have been a lot more direct, and I don't feel like they would have used the word exotic. Small town racist people, like, they usually bandy about their racism.
They're proud of it.
When they're actually intimidated, I better try and tone down my racism. No, that's not what they're trying.
Right, out of fear, maybe. I see what you're saying. That makes complete sense.
They're always motivated by fear. Fear of different, fear
Right.
of gun.
In fact, the very first sighting of the Men in Black, maybe not so coincidentally, also had happened in West Virginia decades earlier in 1924 by a news reporter named John Cole. When you read a lot of different articles about the Men in Black, a lot of times the first attribution of the Men in Black doesn't come till much later, which is a interaction that Harold Dahl had in 1947. But it's one of those first reported versus first encountered things. Once the Men in Black had kind of been established and whispered about, they went back and found other places where people had said to encounter something similar. Just at the time, there was no official name for it or mythos to it or anything that would connect it for people to talk about. So I'm going to talk about the 1924 sighting by John Cole. So John was a reporter that was running down a story on an airplane crash that happened in Braxton County, West Virginia. He showed up to the scene and he was informed by a man in a black suit that no one had been hurt in the crash and no crime had been committed. Fairly innocuous, obviously. Cole then saw what he described as a quote-unquote metal thingamajig. I love him already. On the ground.
The word thingamajig was in use in 1924?
It was. I feel like that does make sense.
The roaring 20s.
Even prior to that, but it does feel very roaring 20s. So Cole saw this metal thingamajig on the ground, and he thought that it looked strange. He picked it up, and he took it home with him to kind of investigate and try and figure out what it might be, just to be awoken in the middle of the night by another man of similar appearance to the man he had met earlier who demanded it back. But how had anyone known that Cole had taken anything at all, let alone a very small piece of metal?
I mean, that's not the weird part. They saw him pick it up and leave. That's not weird.
And then followed him.
The person that he encountered isn't even the person that goes and finds him in the middle of the night. Instead of just saying right then, hey, don't touch anything, he has another person show up and bang on his door in the middle of the night.
This is the weird
That's
part.
weird.
Yes. But it's not weird that they were like, hey, we need that back. The way they went about doing it, very suspicious.
Yeah.
Over the next several decades, dozens of encounters with the Men in Black would be put forth by witnesses in several countries. While these encounters overwhelmingly took place in the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Italy, Australia, France, China, Argentina, Mexico, and the Irish Republic are also represented in these known sightings.
It's just men in black suits. That's it. This is our uniting feature.
Physically, anyways, I would also add intimidation of witnesses as the main uniting feature. So the last good account I found of an interaction took place in the UK in 2003 as was recounted by a secretary at the Ministry of Defense desk. I found an incredibly detailed blog called Men in Black Encounters, a short catalog by Gareth J. Medway that has an amazing bibliography section that's in our sources for this series. So if you'd like to spend some time on some of the most interesting accounts and fall down a black hole of bibliography links, I highly recommend it. It took up a lot of my time. So the following account is taken straight from that article and also cites sources as the Ministry of Defense report, which was quoted in David Clarke's Britain's X-Files and the Fortean Times. Quote, the MOD's UFO desk received a call from a woman who said in the small hours she and her mother had seen lights in the sky from their home in East Dulwich, South London, and feared that this might be a terrorist attack. So she had called Peckham Police, who eventually sent a car around. In it were 2 policemen and 2 men in spacesuits with dark glasses who called themselves Mork and Mindy.
What?
I know, just wait, though. I know, just wait. These men told her not to look at the object because of possible radiation. They carried a transmitter, parentheses Geiger counter possibly, which kept clicking. As the woman's eyes hurt from watching the lights, they offered to wash them out with a solution, though she declined.
Don't do it.
She was then told, quote, not to talk to anyone about this and certainly not to press in case it caused panic, unquote. They then asked the women for their birth signs and left. When the Ministry of Defense contacted the police, they naturally denied the Mork and Mindy story, saying that they had only sent 2 officers without any radiation equipment, and that the women thought that the lights were aliens, not terrorists, and that they themselves had been able to see the lights. Later, the mother wrote a letter of complaint stating that they had discovered that Mork and Mindy was a TV sitcom about an alien, and that they were, quote, trying to make us look foolish.
Oh, they didn't know.
This woman, that's why I was like, wait, because this woman genuinely did not know. We're talking about the UK. This isn't a TV show that they were exposed to in the same way that even though I've only seen like 2 episodes of Mork and Mindy, I know who Mork and Mindy are.
Who are Mork and Mindy? I'm confused completely.
So Robin Williams was Mork?
It was a spin-off from Happy Days that Robin Williams was an alien.
Huh.
I always forget that it was a Happy Days spinoff.
Because it's weird.
It is weird.
So this was them messing with the cops or the cops messing with them?
They feel like the cops were messing with them and then denying it, that they had given the names Mork and Mindy in case these women ever came forward with this story to be able to make them that they had no credibility, that encounter would have no credibility if they decided to talk about it.
It worked.
It did work because we
we
couldn't
are.
even get through the quote. So, who were or are the Men in Black? Are they aliens, government officials, members of an organized crime syndicate? And if Mothman wasn't in fact real and was a hoax or hallucination, etc., why were these men of mystery showing up on the stoops of rural West Virginians? We're going to be discussing the alien theory in the next part of this series concerning Indrid Cold, but right now we're going to dive a little deeper into the more prevalent theory of government agents, which would, of course, be the foundation of the more modern Men in Black that we see in today's pop culture. How many times are we allowed to bring up Will Smith, do you think, before we have to give him money or something?
I was going to say, I wish I had watched it before this so I can have all the fresh commentary, not just the old standby.
But, I mean, if Will Smith is calling us, I'm happy. So, I mean, just keep going. Like, let's just keep saying his name.
While in the 60s and early 70s, it may have seemed outrageous that these strange men could actually have real links to any government program. And those who purported that theory in this time were certainly met with derision and skepticism. But they didn't know what we know now. Mm-hmm. Back 40 or so episodes ago, by the way.
Oh, gosh.
All the way back at episode 7. We're running up on 50.
Yep.
You may remember our coverage of Project Blue Book.
That was 7? I feel like that was number 1.
It was episode 7. I fact-checked before I wrote this episode. I fact-checked my own show for my own show.
That's how dedicated we are to the truth.
Dedication.
So Project Blue Book was just one of many secret government programs throughout the years that investigated and collected data on unidentified flying objects. But Project Blue Book specifically, and the programs that were rolled into it, ran from March of 1952 until December of 1969, wrapping up 2 years and 2 days after the collapse of the Silver Bridge. While doing research for this episode and thinking about the Men in Black, my mind obviously immediately went to Project Blue Book, and then I went back into the Project Blue Book files and proceeded to fall down a rabbit hole of data and rereading different data from this very specific area in this very specific time period. So Blue Book was stationed So Project Blue Book stationed its base of operations at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in nearby Ohio. There were over 12,000 sightings that were part of the government's data collection involving UFOs. Around 50 reports were from West Virginia in the 1960s, and those, of course, were the only ones that I could get a hold of, not necessarily all the reports that happened or were filed or perhaps were reached out to the project or to the Air Force or someone else, and they never actually had a report done, somebody come out to them. So we know that location and the time range is not far-fetched for these government agents to be coming out to people's houses to interview them. While searching through the Blue Book files that lined up with the specific criteria that I mentioned, being within 1 hour of Point Pleasant was one of my data points, within the date range of the Mothman sightings. One of the accounts I happened across that was taken by Project Blue Book was even the famous encounter between Darren Berger and Indrid Cold that you're going to hear more in depth about in the next episode, which I had no idea that his account was actually part of the Project Blue Book files, even though it became famous. I happened upon it literally just searching through these very specific criteria. I had the idea, and then I followed the idea and found actual tangible written proof that these two things were as connected possibly as I thought they were, and I was shooketh with myself.
That's really interesting.
So obviously we're just discussing in this particular section about the possibility of it being government officials. One, because it kind of fits into the narrative of witness suppression that is a theme that very much don't tell anyone you saw this or tell me everything about it. Okay, you wouldn't want to tell anyone else that, would you? Like, that wouldn't look good for you.
You look like a fool talking about Mork and Mindy.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. In terms of the Mothman sightings and the Men in Black and where those two meet, do you think one theory leads credence to the other? Like, because the sightings of Mothman should be taken more seriously because these Men in Black appeared that seem to be very interested in the story not being followed up on, or X, Y, or Z. And equally, the Men in Black should be taken more seriously because they showed up at this very strange time and very strange times before, but specifically in this town's history and what was happening at the time.
I mean, it gives more logic and base to the Men in Black being maybe government officials or someone studying UFO sightings and Mothman, being that these are happening more frequently around all this time and this location when all of these things are happening. So I think it works in the direction of that. But I can't get out of my head that in 1960s or 1970, how many dark-skinned FBI agents are there? Or government officials? There can't be a whole lot.
You're kind of not wrong, though.
And that's my whole thing. That's my big thing that's kind of negating where I always kind of geared towards Men in Black being government officials. That's the big thing now that's kind of sticking out in my head, and I can't believe I never made that connection before. This is a negative to them not being government officials because...
Now I'm also wondering if Will Smith was typecast. Nobody ruined the Men in Black for me.
But also, if they're going to have black agents... distraction, like, oh, isn't it so weird? Don't pay attention to these white guys who are just walking around being normal white guys.
Or to just throw it off completely.
Again, I really wish I could talk to some of these people because I just really honestly feel that they would have said what they meant more. Like, they would have said that he was black or he was African American or like he looked Mexican or he looked X, Y, or Z versus saying that they looked exotic. Like, that's such a weird, like, normally that is like a casually racist thing that a man will say about an ethnically ambiguous woman.
You're right.
Like, you look exotic. I think maybe I'm also having trouble separating the current, like, colloquialisms of
I see that too.
The moment I think of the term exotic, I picture a white man calling a Hispanic female.
I was thinking of Asian women.
Yeah. Oh, were you? See, I wasn't. I was thinking automatically like South American, Hispanic.
Yeah, I was thinking more ethnically ambiguous too. Some range of brown.
Did they say anything about like the facial structure being different or anything like that? Like,
did John Keel, from their descriptions, boil them down to exotic when he regurgitated them?
Oh, if we don't have direct quotes from all the other people, then that's completely different story.
Yep.
If we have it written down that XYZ said exotic.
John Keel put it in a narrative format, so even though it is from these interviews, he wrote it more in like a narrative format based on those interviews.
Like that boy in the box thing.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
So while there is quotes within the book of he said this, she said that, are they true quotes or are they...
This is the paraphrased.
Yes, are they
This has thrown a
paraphrased?
completely different wrench in my how did this racism work theory.
Also, I equally feel like John Keel specifically describing them as quote-unquote demonic supernaturals, unquote. I feel like you would not use the word supernaturals.
Or
to
even
describe
demonic.
Something that he
Oh, you
felt-
would absolutely use demonic. Jewish people are hiding horns under their hat? Yeah, we would absolutely call anyone demonic.
But you have to think about his perspective, and his perspective is basically aliens. So supernatural to him is just like another flavor of alien.
Which I understand that, but demonic is a whole nother religious aspect of not being alien.
That's true, but I equally feel like we use the word demonic to describe what we believe is the Christian concept of demons, but we don't always mean it within the Christian concept, if that makes sense.
I'm not going to describe a person or a thing as being demonic unless it's got like horns and like sharp facial features.
Did you hear me
and-
say
I
that
would.
Jewish people are hiding horns? Because literally people believed. Present tense and past tense.
Yeah.
See, I would use the word demonic if I felt that it was supremely evil. If I felt like something looked or felt or talked or had the feeling of being supremely evil, I would boil that down when repeating it, probably to the word demonic or similar.
Yeah, I just feel like I would use the word evil because it seems more of a presence or an energy of some sort. Like demonic to me creates a physical like kind of connotation of like look. It's more of, I don't know.
I would like to start a linguist podcast, because this is fascinating. And I don't mean that sarcastically, I sort of love this shit.
Yeah, it's super interesting how we all can view different words at different aspects.
The Deep Dark Etymology. Coming this fall.
Dunkin' is putting a whole new spin on pumpkin at Dunkin' with our new pumpkin cream cold brew. Smooth, bold cold brew topped with velvety pumpkin cream cold foam made with cinnamon and nutmeg spices. And there's more pumpkin for you to love, like the delicious fall classic, our pumpkin spice signature latte. Rich espresso topped with whipped cream, caramel drizzle, and cinnamon sugar. That's how we pumpkin at Dunkin'. Sip into the fall season with the $3 medium pumpkin cream cold brew or pumpkin spice signature latte. America runs on Dunkin'. Participation may vary. Limited time offer. Exclusions apply. Valid on pumpkin spice signature latte only in all cold foam cold brew.
You might have noticed a change in your neighborhood lately. Yep, Sprint stores are now T-Mobile stores. Now that Sprint is T-Mobile, you get more coverage, value, and benefits than ever before. We've invested billions to bring our 5G from big cities to small towns across America. And great coverage is just the start. From high-speed mobile hotspot data to weekly deals and giveaways, our customers get tons of great benefits. Head to your new T-Mobile store to learn more.
Qualifying service and capable device required. Coverage not available in some areas. Some uses may require certain plan or features. See T-Mobile.com.
Did they ever have a little bit more description about this, like, transmitter thing at all in any?
They did not. A consultant that was working on a UFO case named Dr. Herbert Hopkins, he was working on this case in Maine. He got a phone call from someone that was allegedly some type of activist in the UFO community and wanted to visit Hopkins or vice versa. And he ended up meeting him right after, basically. Like, they hung up the phone, they met each other right after. He just showed up on his door. This man was wearing a black suit, black tie. He had, quote unquote, unusual facial appearances. But this man is described as having no hair or eyebrows and being extremely pale. So that gives at least a little bit of racial diversity, I suppose. At other times, in other places, these men in black had still strange appearances in some way or another, but weren't always dark-skinned or didn't always look exotic. It appears, what I'm picturing for this specific one involving Hopkins is powder. Did you guys ever see powder?
Yep.
Albino.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, like gets struck by lightning, gets powers. I'm picturing powder.
I remember the movie, 100%. When you were talking about the John Cole, the first incident, did he give them back the metal thing?
I bet he did. Showed up at his house in the middle of the night.
I think he very much was, I'm out.
That's the right response.
Deeply regret. Let's also talk about the 1947 Men in Black sighting that I was talking about that a lot of times is attributed to starting the Men in Black movement. On June 27th, 1947, Harold Dahl was in the Puget Sound near Maury Island, which is Washington State, with his son and his dog on a boat, and they saw 6 donut-shaped aircrafts that were hovering around a mile above the boat. Eventually, one of them came down and dropped some sort of metallic or molten debris into the water that made it almost seem like it was raining this material. Some hit his son on the arm, and some hit the dog, and the dog died.
I hate this story.
He took pictures for proof, and then he later showed his supervisor at work these images. He told his boss, but then a few days after talking to his boss about it, he was visited by a man in black. And that specific man in black told him, do not discuss this encounter. And then he was visited by Air Force agents who said that they were gathering intelligence. This is a report from the FBI concerning this incident. Dear sir, the following in general are the facts regarding the flying disc story that started by Redacted, which subsequently resulted in news stories by the Tacoma Times, the Boise Statesman, and the Chicago Times that a B-25 carrying Army intelligence officers was shot down and or sabotaged over Kelso, Washington on August 1st, 1947 because it was carrying some flying disc fragments. The original story, as related by Redacted, was to the effect that Redacted, while patrolling in his boat near Maury Island, Washington, sighted 6 flying discs, one of which fluttered to the earth and disintegrated, showering his boat with fragments which caused some damage to the boat and killed his dog. He wrote a letter to Redacted, care of, I believe that is Biff Davis Company, but it is a very marked up original document, which publishes fantastic adventure magazines in Chicago, sending him fragments of the flying disc and relating the above story. Requested Trans Radio News in Chicago to verify the story as related to Redacted. Telegraphed Redacted, confirming Redacted story. Redacted then engaged Redacted. Redacted also called to attend the meeting, with United Airlines pilot who had also reported seeing flying disc fragments and Army intelligence to attend this meeting. So evidently, this man's story was partly corroborated by a United Airlines pilot who also had reported seeing flying disc fragments in that same area on that same day.
Why will no one stop this redacted man from harming everyone? We must put him behind bars. Redacted, damn you.
Yeah, I think that's going to have to be heavily edited to not be nonsensical. Quote, unquote, quote, unquote.
There were photos, you said?
And I'm assuming, like, the son went to the hospital, right? I mean...
So there were photos, but it's just reported that there were photos and that the boss seen the photos, and I'm guessing that when this man in black showed up, that they were shown the photos, and when the Air Force showed up, they were also shown the photos, which, by the way, the Air Force, not coincidentally at all, was in charge of Project Blue Book during this same kind of time period. It's a little early, but equally, just because we say that officially the project started in a certain year does not mean that there were not already things. We know that, I think it's Grudge, there's some other projects that were then rolled into Project Blue Book. So it's not outlandish that the Air Force specifically would be who was sent to investigate this. I mean, the same thing with any government agency, really. None of them would particularly be outlandish to be sent. Obviously, we know that it happened because we have this official documents that this one specifically sent the director of the FBI. And there's 100,000 stamps, like recorded, indexed, different dates. 1953, 1964, the case numbers.
And you said there was a report of military that got shot down?
Yes.
I mean, could that have been jet fuel that just landed on them because it was shot down right above them?
It could have been, but it equally does not say that it was in that exact area. It seems like that's the swamp gas story. They're like, oh, it could have been this. But if it was that, why wouldn't they just say, oh, this is what happened, you saw it. Oh, this United Airlines pilot also saw it. Let's talk about that. Why would they talk about a flying disc, and why would there be sick regarding that? But the whole idea behind that, we're going down our aliens, well, which is for the next episode, is the idea that another description or encounter with the Men in Black, that one, then got covered in Gray Barker's book. There was also a private pilot, Kenneth Arnold, who also, in that same time frame, allegedly claimed to have seen a string of 9 different UFOs in that same kind of area. That would be June 24th, 1947. Fred Chrisman was also a man that talked about seeing this falling debris and receiving threats from the Men in Black.
So where's the romance storyline here?
I don't know that I can formulate one here.
Oh, now it's a challenge. Now we have to. All these Men in Black are just jealous lovers of aliens who are trying to intimidate other people from knowing they're aliens. It's a very abusive relationship. This is not okay.
So that specific account would be retold in Gray Barker's book, They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers. But many skeptics believe that this version of the story was a hoax. My whole thing with the hoax idea is the airline's pilot separately seeing something. I mean, we can say that he jumped on a bandwagon, perhaps. Like, perhaps he didn't see anything, but he heard the airline pilot did. I would find it very suspicious that some airline pilot would hear the story of some random dude and decide to back him up for clout.
Not a back him up clout thing, just a, like, sowing chaos thing. Like, yeah, I saw that fucking thing too. That was fucked up. Aliens. Humans love a little chaos. Have you been on the internet?
What if we discovered that, like, Kurt Russell was this guy's son?
Bum, bum, bum.
All I know is if I was with my son on a boat with my dog and I saw these lights and something came down and killed my dog and injured my son, I would not shut the fuck up. I would not rest until I understood what happened.
until a couple guys show up at your front door.
I was gonna say, would you keep running your mouth after the Men in Black show up at your door?
And they don't outwardly threaten you, but they're just very tall.
Right now, in our current culture where we can go to the internet if we feel like we've been wronged and get social justice in that way, the government, when there is no recourse for the government and you know that there is no recourse for anything the government does to you,
Right.
and you're just going to scream into a void about it, no one's going to listen to you, you're going to become the crackpot that saw the alien. I feel like there's only so far you could push that.
Yeah.
Even if it kills your dog. If it's 1947 and the government says shut the fuck up, you shut the fuck up, I feel like. Until it's like 30 years later. And then you're like, do I feel safe yet? Maybe.
Well, in this time period, too, the hospital might not have been able to figure out what it was that happened or what substance caused it.
I do want to briefly discuss another Men in Black theory that won't fit well with our Indrid Cold episode. And that is, when we discussed Mothman, we talked about the idea that the government was doing experiments. And so there's a different kind of theory that's like, okay, maybe these are a different kind of government official that are trying to hush up these sightings of Mothman specifically. And this then comes down to the Men in Black in Point Pleasant during this 13-month period of time very specifically. Is it possible that these government officials have nothing to do with shutting up about something supernatural or shutting people up about aliens, but not wanting people to discover about these secret government experiments that could have led to the existence of a creature or cryptid such as Mothman?
I mean, there is that theory that we discussed with Mothman being a experiment that had gone wrong, that they just had kept underground or in a bunker that got out or escaped.
I mean, if I have to pick.
All the genetic modification that was trying to happen at the time.
And they shot it down over a boat with a man, a kid, and a dog on it. And that it was Mothman that...
Moth donut.
It was the blood and guts of Mothman.
Separate that sighting specifically to the Men in Black sightings that were happening around Point Pleasant.
Yeah.
I will do no such thing.
I will
Moth
do no
donut
such
lives.
thing.
Justice for Moth donut.
I honestly would like to think that it was government officials that were trying to cover up something. That's probably my biggest thing.
I think the reason that people hook onto the government theory is because it really is the theory that makes the most sense to me, more than other ones that we'll be talking about in the future. But just in general, if I was put back in time in Point Pleasant while this is happening and just after, I might think that's crazy. But we know that the government has basically had an active UFO program pretty consistently over the last 70 years.
Not to mention other crazy experiments on animals and humans, and probably
Putting
both.
Obama on the moon.
Just general things that we know exist, different conspiracies we've covered in the past. We know they exist.
And they've openly admit that they've covered them up and then released the information later. I mean...
Thank you, Freedom of Information Act.
Right.
You've done so much for us personally.
Right. It's easy to end up at that theory because it's happened, and there's proof that it's happened. You know?
Yeah, and I feel like it's gotten more and more believable as time went on. The people that purported that theory were heavily ridiculed, that there were Men in Black at all, that if there were Men in Black, that they were somehow covering anything up for the government or working for the government. I feel like every year, every subsequent year, but especially after things like the Church Committee, after the Warren Commission, after all these different things where people got more information about things that the government was doing, it became more and more likely that that's what it was, and people recognized that. The Men in Black became such an infamous part of UFOs and cryptids, basically anything that the Men in Black had been quote-unquote known to interfere with, or interfere with the suppression of information of people telling their story. And this, like, fear, if you saw something, you might not want to say anything. Just the looming threat that the government would find out that you were talking.
Don't ask, don't tell.
It almost makes me wonder if it is a false flag operation.
Yep. That's
I was just trying to figure out how to word that. Like, the whole Men in Black entirely.
I really was trying to get there. You could see how hard it was for me to try and put the words together. But it almost feels like now we would say, oh, like the Men in Black, and we would find it kind of interesting, and we would say, oh, it was totally government officials. But if we were to put ourselves back in that time period, it would be a real deterrent for ever saying anything about anything. And the government had Project Blue Book going on at this time.
Not just Project Blue Book, yeah, a ton.
And so the idea that if people saw something that the government might be participating in that was strange or weird, that they wouldn't speak out about it because of the fear of the Men in Black, it kind of feels like a false flag operation.
Just sowing the fear.
They actually actively sent agents to intimidate people just so that the word would spread, especially because a lot of the word being spread was in these different UFO communities and fringe science communities, where people that were writing books, people that were journalists, people that had access to spreading that information were the actual people that were being targeted.
And it could have not even been completely crafted by themselves. It could have been an afterthought after somebody came across a project that the FBI was working on or the CIA was working on, and ended up turning it into, you know, the Men in Black and Mothman and whatever. And they're like, why don't we use this to our advantage?
In this current situation, let's just let them believe and spread that.
A eureka moment. Like, hey.
It works to so many different benefits. Yep. This has been a wild ride from beginning to end, and I wrote this. So I don't know how this happened. Man, I don't want that to be true, but it might be true.
I think it is. I still believe that Mothman was government created.
I'm not even focused on the Mothman part of it at this point. I'm focused on just the Men in Black in general. Oh no, this is going to be a rabbit hole. I want to know what was happening around the time periods whenever there was a extremely publicized Men in Black encounter, and go back retroactively, try and find different things that have been released since then, things that have been declassified, and see how many big government projects I can date align with sightings of the Men in Black in that region, that it possibly was just like, look over here, don't look over here, and if you do look over here, don't say anything, because the Men in Black will get you in the middle of the night.
Watch the left hand, don't think about what the right hand is doing.
And honestly, that even proves the bigger theory about choosing pale people who have no eyebrows or hair, dark-skinned people that people wouldn't normally see, taller people, people that just have these weird appearances to further drive that fear that they're weird and different and
or supernatural or otherworldly or demonic, or any of these descriptions that we would typically not use to describe people.
And they purposely hand chose those people to do that, to be their Men in Black.
Social control on a governmental level? That's impossible.
And now a car just pulled up and there are Men in Black getting out of the car and they're about to knock on my door.
But they're just distracting us.
Yeah, even in, like, the Men in Black movie, what is that really pale, tall man in the Men in Black movie that has a very strangely shaped head?
Oh, I know who you're talking about. He's the caretaker or whatever of the prince.
He has a very strange, otherworldly type of look to him.
Wasn't he the actor who played Lurch in the Addams Family? I think it's the same actor, if I'm not mistaken.
The original Lurch was played by Ted Cassidy, but I think Carl Strucken might be who we're talking about. He was also in Star Trek, which is honestly perfect. And he's a Dutch actor. I think he was in Twin Peaks. And if he isn't him, he still fits the entire profile.
Yeah.
For exactly
Totally.
what we're talking about.
Totally.
He was in the Men in Black for a small role. The Addams Family.
Yep.
He was in The Witches of Eastwick, the original movie.
I wonder how many times he got paid to be a Men in Black by the CIA and FBI. His
face is just very distinctive and atypical.
He got his start because the FBI was paying him to be an Men in Black and go around the country scaring people. And that's how he got into the acting career of the supernatural.
I will discount no theories at this time. I will not even tell you that that's ridiculous. I have learned that nothing is ridiculous.
That's what you've learned? That's what you've learned for the past 2 years?
But you couldn't accept our beautiful theory about the Titanic.
Oh God, the Titanic.
That was just so beautifully crafted.
She was the distraction.
Other thoughts, opinions, questions concerning the Men in Black?
Now that you've blown your own mind?
This one may top the Titanic. I dare say.
I'm honestly super disappointed that it's somehow so believable. Both things are so believable, right?
The Titanic, yeah.
God damn it.
She admits it.
It's been like 30 episodes. Give it a rest.
I'll die on this hill. I'll die on this boat hill.
There's just this little 2 feet of island coming out of the water, and me and Chip are in a raft on top and say, "We'll die on this hill."
It was episode 12. Episode 12.
You just brought up episode 7.
Directly in reference to this episode.
And so is this, because that was the second best theory to date.
Join us next time as we discuss Indrid Cold and also bring back up Mothman and the Men in Black in relation to, are the Men in Black actually aliens?
We have a lot of opinions.
We do have a lot of opinions, and we're finding new ones every day. Until next time, I'm Mo.
I'm Chip.
And I'm Mikey.
You just listened to the Deep Dark Truth Podcast. See you next time. And remember, your local cryptids want to meet you.
Dunkin' is putting a whole new spin on pumpkin at Dunkin' with our new Pumpkin Cream Cold Brew. Smooth, bold cold brew topped with velvety pumpkin cream cold foam made with cinnamon and nutmeg spices. And there's more pumpkin for you to love, like the delicious fall classic, our Pumpkin Spice Signature Latte. Rich espresso topped with whipped cream, caramel drizzle, and cinnamon sugar. That's how we pumpkin at Dunkin'. Sip into the fall season with the $3 medium Pumpkin Cream Cold Brew or Pumpkin Spice Signature Latte. America runs on Dunkin'. Participation may vary. Limited time offer. Exclusions apply. Valid on Pumpkin Spice Signature Latte only in all cold foam cold brew.
You might have noticed a change in your neighborhood lately. Yep, Sprint stores are now T-Mobile stores. Now that Sprint is T-Mobile, you get more coverage, value, and benefits than ever before. We've invested billions to bring our 5G from big cities to small towns across America. And great coverage is just the start. From high-speed mobile hotspot data to weekly deals and giveaways, our customers get tons of great benefits. Head to your new T-Mobile store to learn more.
Qualifying service and capable device required. Coverage not available in some areas. Some uses may require certain plan or features. See T-Mobile.com.